I always thought my life was solid. A steady job, 2 beautiful kids, and a marriage I believed in. Jenna was my rock, or so I thought. We'd been together for 10 years, navigating the highs and lows of life like a team. Or maybe I was the only one on the team, and I just didn't notice it until everything began to crumble. It started subtly, almost invisibly. Jenna's job in marketing required travel, and I respected her drive. She'd come home with tales of late-night client meetings, presentations, and endless networking. I wanted to believe her, but over the last few months, her stories lacked the spark they used to have. The passion in her eyes that once fueled my admiration had dimmed. I could have ignored it, should have, maybe. But there were nights when her laughter was quieter, her texts shorter, her gaze distant. She wasn't with me, even when she sat right across the room. And the worst part? I convinced myself it was all in my head. Until that Tuesday afternoon. She was away on another business trip, supposedly meeting a big client in Boston. I got the usual messages, a quick, "miss you," followed by, "I'll call later," then silence. But something about her last text made me uneasy. It was too polished, like it had been rehearsed. While scrolling through the internet mindlessly, my phone buzzed. An unknown number flashed on the screen. My heart skipped a beat. Maybe it was Jenna, using someone else's phone. I answered, hoping to hear her voice. But instead, it was his. I froze, phone pressed to my ear, as a man's voice filled the silence. It was smooth, confident, too familiar for someone who was supposedly a stranger. "Hey, babe," he said casually. "Just wanted to make sure you got to the hotel okay." My breath hitched. For a moment, I thought I'd misdialed. But no. This was Jenna's number. My Jenna. And the man on the other end wasn't just anyone. He was calling her babe. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My throat felt tight, like a rope had wrapped around it, choking the words I desperately wanted to shout. I could hear faint sounds of movement in the background, papers rustling, a door creaking shut. Then I heard her voice. "I'm here," she replied, light and playful, a tone I hadn't heard her use with me in years. "I told you I'd call when I was done. You didn't have to check in on me." Her laughter pierced me, a sharp blade that cut deeper with each second. She was laughing with him, not me. Him. The man chuckled. "Couldn't help myself. Can't wait to see you tonight." My stomach churned. Tonight. I ended the call without saying a word. My hands shook so violently that I nearly dropped the phone. The world around me blurred, the colors and sounds melding into an incomprehensible haze. I could barely comprehend what I had just overheard. For a moment, I convinced myself it was all a misunderstanding. A wrong number, maybe. But deep down, I knew the truth. I could hear it in her voice, the softness, the intimacy. That wasn't how you spoke to a colleague or a friend. That was how you spoke to someone you longed for. Jenna wasn't mine anymore. I leaned against the kitchen counter, my mind racing. What now? Should I confront her? Call her back and demand an explanation? The thought of hearing her lie to me again made my chest tighten. Instead, I opened her laptop, hoping for answers. She always left it at home when she traveled, saying she preferred working from her phone. The password was easy, our anniversary. My hands trembled as I typed it in. I wasn't sure what I was even looking for, but I had to find something, anything, to confirm what I'd just heard. Her email account was logged in. My eyes scanned the inbox, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Just work correspondence, family updates, and promotions. Then, I noticed a folder labeled Personal. It was hidden, tucked away beneath layers of other folders. I opened it. The first email was from him. "Can't wait to see you tonight. I've booked the room, same place as last time. Don't forget the red dress. It's my favorite." The blood drained from my face. My hands gripped the edges of the laptop, knuckles white. There was no denying it now. She wasn't just distant. She wasn't just distracted. She was unfaithful. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. Anger, betrayal, heartbreak. They all swirled inside me, crashing like waves against the fragile shell of my composure. How long had this been going on? Months? Years? Was I the fool who didn't see it? Or did she think I was too naive to ever find out? I closed the laptop, my mind racing. Jenna would be back in 2 days. 2 days to figure out what to do, how to confront her, how to protect my children from the truth that would shatter their world. But one thing was certain, I couldn't stay here. Not like this. Not with her lies suffocating me. I needed to act, and I needed to act fast. The hours that followed were a blur of emotions, rage, heartbreak, confusion. But one thing became clear. I couldn't let Jenna walk back into this house and pretend everything was fine. Not after what I'd heard. Not after what I'd seen. I sat in the dim light of the living room, the kids' laughter drifting down from their rooms. They were playing a game before bed, completely oblivious to the storm brewing beneath their feet. For their sake, I had to keep it together, even as my world fell apart. I grabbed a notebook from the shelf and began jotting down a plan. If I let her come home to me like nothing had changed, I'd lose the upper hand. I needed to act now, while she was gone, while I still had time to think clearly. First, I called my sister, Emily. She lived about an hour away and had always been my go-to in times of crisis. If anyone could help me pull this off, it was her. "Hey, Em," I said, my voice trembling. "Hey, what's wrong?" She could hear the strain in my voice immediately. "It's Jenna. I found out she's been cheating." There was a pause. Then, "Oh my God. Are you sure?" "Yes." My voice cracked. I heard her. I saw the emails. Emily didn't hesitate. "Pack up the kids. Come here. You don't have to deal with this alone." That was the first part of the plan. I'd take the kids and leave before Jenna came home. I wanted her to walk into an empty house, to feel the weight of her betrayal when she realized what it had cost her. Next, I needed proof. Hard evidence, in case this escalated into a custody battle. I returned to her laptop and began gathering everything. The emails, the hotel bookings, even the receipts for the gifts she'd bought for him. It was all there, hidden in plain sight, as if she'd grown so comfortable in her deception that she stopped caring if I found out. Then came the hardest part, telling the kids. I couldn't explain the full truth. Not yet. They were too young to understand the complexities of betrayal. All they needed to know was that we were going on a little vacation to Aunt Emily's. I packed quickly, grabbing essentials for myself and the kids. Clothes, school supplies, favorite toys. Anything we'd need for at least a few weeks away from home. My hands shook as I zipped up the suitcases, the enormity of what I was doing sinking in. By the time I tucked the kids into bed, exhaustion had settled over me like a heavy blanket. Bryce, my oldest, looked at me with concern. "Dad, are you okay?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, buddy. Just tired. We've got a big day tomorrow." He nodded, trusting me completely. That trust felt like a weight on my shoulders, a reminder of how much I had to protect them from the chaos Jenna had unleashed on our lives. When morning came, I loaded the kids into the car and drove away from the house that had once been our home. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The kids thought it was an adventure, chattering excitedly about seeing Aunt Emily and their cousins. I envied their innocence, their ability to see this as a spontaneous road trip rather than the start of a new, uncertain chapter. As I pulled into Emily's driveway, she was already waiting for us, her arms open wide. She hugged me tightly, and for the first time in days, I let myself cry. "We'll figure this out," she said, her voice steady. "You're not alone." But as I sat on her couch that night, staring at my phone, I couldn't help but think about Jenna. She would be landing in less than 24 hours, expecting to come home to her family. Instead, she'd find an empty house, and something more. I'd left a surprise for her on the dining room table, a folder containing all the evidence of her affair, along with a note. "I know everything. The kids and I are gone. Don't call me." The next day passed in a haze of anticipation and dread. Emily kept the kids busy with games and crafts, while I spent most of the day pacing her living room, phone in hand. Part of me dreaded Jenna's reaction, but another part couldn't wait for her to face the consequences of what she'd done. I didn't have to wait long. By the time Jenna landed, I knew she'd have seen the note. The missed calls and frantic texts started coming within minutes. "Where are you? This isn't funny. Come home now? What's going on? Please answer me." I ignored every one of them. Instead, I forwarded the evidence I'd gathered to my lawyer and spent the rest of the day documenting everything. Dates, times, conversations. I was preparing for war. Later that evening, my phone rang. This time, it wasn't Jenna. It was an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Hey, came her voice, cracking with emotion. Please don't hang up. I just want to talk. I didn't say anything. Silence was my only weapon. Okay, fine. I deserve that, she said, her voice wavering. But can we just talk? Please. I took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of restraint. What is there to talk about, Jenna? I know everything. She let out a shaky breath. It's not what you think. Don't insult me, I snapped. I heard you, Jenna. I saw the emails. The hotel bookings. How long? How long have you been lying to me? She didn't answer right away, and the silence on the other end of the line spoke louder than words ever could. When she finally spoke, her voice was small, almost unrecognizable. I didn't mean for this to happen. I laughed bitterly. That's what you're going with? That it just happened? Do you even understand what you've done? You've destroyed our family. You've destroyed me. Please, she begged. Let me come see you. Let me explain. No, I said firmly. You can talk to my lawyer. Her sobs were audible now, but I didn't care. Not anymore. Don't do this, she pleaded. We can fix this. Fix this. My voice cracked with anger. You think this is something we can fix? You've been cheating on me for months, Jenna. Maybe years. And you didn't even have the decency to try to hide it. You just threw it in my face, like I wouldn't notice. I love you, she whispered. Don't you dare. I spat. Don't you dare say those words to me. Not after everything you've done. There was a long silence before she spoke again. What about the kids? They need me. They're safe, I said coldly. And they don't need someone who puts her own selfish desires above her family. I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking as I set the phone down. Emily appeared in the doorway, a look of quiet concern on her face. You okay? She asked. No, I admitted. But I will be. That night, Jenna's texts continued to pour in, each one more desperate than the last. But I didn't respond. I couldn't. My silence was the only power I had left, and I wasn't ready to give it up. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. For the first time in days, I wasn't drowning in uncertainty. I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life, and there was no turning back. The next morning, I woke up to a flurry of messages from Jenna. They ranged from anger to despair, from pleas for forgiveness to outright denial of what she'd done. It was like she was throwing everything at the wall, hoping something would stick. I didn't reply to any of them. Around noon, Emily came into the room, her expression cautious. She called me, she said softly. I sighed, rubbing my temples. What did she say? She's losing it. She wanted to know where you and the kids are, and when I didn't tell her, she broke down crying. She said she was going to drive out here. I shot up from the couch. What? Did she say when? Emily shook her head. No, but I told her not to bother. I made it clear you don't want to see her right now. My stomach churned at the thought of Jenna showing up unannounced, begging me to come back. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was a deeper, more complicated ache, a mixture of love for the woman she used to be and loathing for the stranger she'd become. Later that day, my lawyer, Mark, called to check in. I explained everything, from the overheard phone call to the evidence I'd found on her laptop. You've got a strong case, he said. The emails alone are damning, but we need to move quickly if you want full custody of the kids. Do whatever you need to do, I said. I don't want them growing up in a house built on lies. That evening, as I sat on the porch watching the kids play, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a voicemail from Jenna. I hesitated before pressing play, unsure if I could handle hearing her voice again. But curiosity got the better of me. Hi, she began, her voice thick with tears. I came home, and the house feels so empty without you. I can't believe this is happening. Please, just call me. Let's talk. I'll do anything, therapy, counseling, whatever it takes. Just come home. I love you. I deleted the message. It wasn't just the house that was empty. It was her words, her promises, her love. Everything about our life together had been a lie, and now she was trying to rewrite the ending. But I wasn't going to let her. That night, as the kids slept upstairs, Emily and I stayed up late talking. She asked me if I'd thought about what came next, not just for me, but for the kids. "Have you told them anything yet?" she asked. "Not much," I admitted. "Just that we're staying here for a while." "They're going to have questions eventually," she said gently. "You can't protect them from this forever." "I know," I said, my voice heavy. "But for now, they deserve some kind of normalcy." Emily nodded, her eyes soft with understanding. "You're doing the right thing, you know, taking them away from all of this." "Am I?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Because it doesn't feel like it." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You are. Trust me." For the first time in days, I allowed myself to believe her. 2 days passed without incident. I kept the kids busy while Emily did her best to keep things light. But the tension was always there, lingering like a storm on the horizon. Every time my phone buzzed, I braced myself for Jenna's name to appear. By the third day, I stopped counting her missed calls. She had switched from begging to apologizing, then back to begging again. Her desperation was palpable, but I refused to be swayed. I was done being manipulated. Late that afternoon, while the kids were napping, Emily sat me down in her kitchen. "You can't avoid her forever," she said gently. "I'm not avoiding her," I replied defensively. I don't know what to say." Emily raised an eyebrow. "Don't you?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you've already said everything that matters. You're done. You just haven't told her that yet." Her words hit me like a freight train. She was right. I had been avoiding closure, hoping it would somehow come on its own. But Jenna wasn't going to make this easy for me. She never did. Later that evening, after the kids were asleep, I stepped outside to call her. The phone rang only once before she picked up. "Finally," she breathed. "I've been losing my mind, waiting for you to call." I didn't bother with pleasantries. "This has to stop, Jenna." "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You and me," I said firmly. "It's over. There's nothing left to fix." She let out a choked sob. "You can't mean that. We have a family, John. We can't just throw it all away." "You threw it away the moment you started seeing him," I said, my voice rising. "You didn't just cheat on me, Jenna. You cheated on us. Our family, our life, everything we built together." "I made a mistake," she pleaded. "A horrible mistake. But we can get through this. People come back from worse. Please, just give me a chance to prove." "No," I interrupted. "I'm not giving you a chance to lie to me again. I've heard enough lies to last a lifetime." Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't falter. "I've already spoken to a lawyer," I said. "You'll be hearing from him soon." "A lawyer?" she repeated, her voice breaking. "You're divorcing me? What did you think was going to happen?" I asked bitterly. "That I'd just forgive you and go back to pretending everything was fine? I can't do that, Jenna. I won't." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When she finally spoke, her voice was cold. "Fine. If that's how you want it, then I guess there's nothing left to say." She hung up before I could respond, leaving me standing alone on the porch, the phone still pressed to my ear. I stared out into the darkness, a strange mix of relief and sadness washing over me. It was done. The thread that had held our life together had finally snapped. The next morning, my lawyer called with updates. He'd filed the paperwork, and the next step would be serving Jenna with the divorce papers. It felt surreal, hearing those words out loud. Divorce. It was the end of everything I thought I knew, but it was also the beginning of something new. Something I wasn't quite ready for but had no choice but to face. When the kids asked if we'd be going back home soon, I forced a smile and said, "Not yet. But we're safe here, and that's what matters." Bryce, my oldest, gave me a long look, his young eyes wiser than they had any right to be. "It's because of Mom, isn't it?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to protect him from the truth, to shield him from the pain of knowing the woman he loved had betrayed us. But I couldn't lie to him, not after everything we'd been through. "It's complicated," I said carefully, "but no matter what happens, I love you and your sister more than anything. That will never change." He nodded, his small shoulders squared with a strength that mirrored my own. In that moment, I realized I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for them, for their future, for their chance to grow up in a home built on trust, not lies. And I wasn't going to let Jenna take that away from us. The next day began quietly. Emily took the kids out for ice cream, giving me some much-needed time to myself. I spent the morning pacing the house, mentally preparing for what lay ahead. Divorce papers, custody battles, emotional fallout. It all loomed over me like a storm cloud. I was staring at a half-empty coffee cup when there was a sharp knock at the door. My stomach dropped. I didn't need to check to know who it was. Jenna had found us. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. There she stood, her hair disheveled, her eyes rimmed with red. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "John," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please." I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. "This isn't the time or place, Jenna." "Where else am I supposed to go?" she asked, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You won't answer my calls, you've taken the kids, and now you're filing for divorce. I don't even know how to fight for us when you won't let me in." "There's nothing to fight for," I said firmly. "You made your choice." She reached for my arm, her touch desperate. I was stupid. I got caught up in something I didn't understand, and I let it spiral out of control. "But I love you. I've always loved you." I shook my head, pulling away from her. "Love doesn't look like this, Jenna. Love doesn't cheat. Love doesn't lie." Her sobs grew louder, her shoulders shaking as she tried to compose herself. "What about the kids? Don't they deserve a family?" "They deserve better than this," I said, my voice cracking. "Better than lies and betrayal. They deserve a mother who puts them first, not someone who sneaks around behind their father's back." She flinched at my words but didn't argue. Instead, she sank onto the porch steps, her head in her hands. "I don't know who I am anymore," she admitted. "I've ruined everything." For the first time, I saw her not as my betrayer but as a broken woman, lost in her own mistakes. But that didn't soften the pain. If anything, it made it worse. Because part of me still wanted to believe in her, to believe in the life we'd built together. But that part of me was gone now, buried under the weight of everything she'd done. "You need to leave," I said quietly. "There's nothing here for you." She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. "John, please. Just give me one chance. One chance to fix this." I hesitated, the words catching in my throat. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to lay bare all the anger and heartbreak she'd caused. But another part of me, the part that had loved her for so many years, just wanted her to go. "I can't," I said finally, my voice barely audible. "It's too late." She nodded, as if she had expected that answer all along. Slowly, she stood and walked back to her car, her movements heavy with defeat. As she drove away, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. Relief that she was gone, but sorrow for what could never be repaired. When Emily and the kids returned, I put on a brave face, pretending nothing had happened. But inside, I felt hollow, like a part of me had been stripped away. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about Jenna's words, her pleas for forgiveness, her desperation to make things right. And for the first time, I realized that forgiveness wasn't about her. It wasn't about giving her another chance, or pretending the past didn't exist. It was about freeing myself. The following days passed in tense silence. Jenna stopped calling, though I doubted it was because she had given up. It felt more like the calm before the storm, a brief respite before everything exploded. My lawyer, Mark, called with updates on the divorce proceedings. "We've got everything we need," he assured me. "The emails, the hotel receipts, your written account, they're all solid evidence. If she tries to contest custody, she'll have an uphill battle." "Good," I said, my voice firm. "I don't want her dragging the kids into this mess." Still, the idea of a custody fight gnawed at me. Jenna might have been unfaithful, but she was still their mother. No matter how much I hated what she'd done, I couldn't deny that the kids loved her. Bryce, especially, had started asking questions about why we weren't going home. "Dad," he said one night, his voice hesitant, "did you and Mom have a fight?" I sighed, pulling him close. It's a little more complicated than that, buddy. But I promise, no matter what happens, I'll always be here for you and your sister. He nodded, though I could see the worry in his eyes. Will we ever go back home? I didn't have an answer for that. The next day, Jenna finally broke her silence. A letter arrived, delivered by a courier. I opened it reluctantly, half expecting another plea for forgiveness. Instead, it was a formal response from her lawyer, contesting the divorce and demanding shared custody of the kids. She's fighting back, I told Mark during our next call. That's not surprising, he said. But don't let it rattle you. We've got the evidence. If it goes to court, we'll be ready. The days that followed were a whirlwind of preparation. Mark coached me on what to expect if Jenna decided to escalate things, while Emily helped me keep the kids distracted. Despite her reassurances, I could see the toll it was taking on her too. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the kids play, Emily turned to me. What if she tries to take them? She asked, her voice low. She won't, I said, though the words felt hollow. She can't. You don't know that, Emily replied. She's desperate, and desperate people do crazy things. Her words stayed with me long after she'd gone inside. That night, I barely slept, haunted by the possibility of Jenna trying to take the kids. I double-checked the locks on the doors, a wave of paranoia washing over me. The next morning, I called Mark and told him about my fears. Is there anything we can do to prevent her from taking them? I asked. We can file for a temporary custody order, he said. It would give you sole custody until the divorce is finalized, but it might escalate things. I don't care, I said. Do it. Within days, the order was granted. It was a small victory, but one that brought me some measure of peace. For now, the kids were safe. For now, they were mine. But deep down, I knew the real battle was just beginning. The first court date came sooner than expected. It was just a preliminary hearing, but the tension in the room was suffocating. Jenna sat on the opposite side, her face pale but composed. Her lawyer was polished, confident, and immediately began arguing for shared custody, claiming Jenna's affair had no bearing on her ability to be a good mother. Mark countered with precision. He presented the evidence, emails, receipts, and even the voicemail Jenna had left, begging for another chance. He argued that her actions demonstrated a lack of judgment and stability, making her unfit for sole custody. I avoided looking at her, afraid of what I might see. When the judge called for a break, I stepped outside for air. Jenna followed me. John, she called softly. I stopped but didn't turn around. Please, don't do this. We can find a way to make this work. For the kids. I finally faced her, my expression cold. This isn't about us anymore. It's about them. And I'm doing what's best for them. Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't waver. The break ended, and we returned to the courtroom, each of us more resolute than before. The judge ruled to uphold the temporary custody order, giving me primary custody until a final decision could be made. Jenna looked crushed as the decision was read, but I felt only relief. For now, the kids were safe. With the temporary order in place, life settled into a fragile rhythm. The kids began school. Emily helped with their routines, and I focused on my work and the ongoing legal process. Bryce adjusted quickly, but my younger daughter struggled. She missed Jenna, often asking when she'd see her again. I allowed supervised visits, but only under strict conditions. Jenna arrived each time, visibly emotional but determined to win the kids over. She brought gifts and lavished them with attention, but I could see the strain in her eyes. She was trying to undo the damage, but some things couldn't be undone. One evening after a visit, Bryce pulled me aside. Mom said you're keeping us from her. Is that true? I crouched down to his level, meeting his gaze. I'm trying to do what's best for you and your sister. Your mom loves you, but we have some things to figure out. It's not about keeping you from her. He nodded slowly, but I could see the confusion and hurt in his eyes. I hated that they were caught in the middle, but there was no avoiding it. A week later, Jenna's lawyer filed a motion to overturn the custody order, claiming I was alienating the children. It was a bold move, and one that caught me off guard. Mark reassured me we were prepared, but the stress was overwhelming. In the weeks leading up to the hearing, I began to notice strange things. A car parked down the street for hours, Unfamiliar numbers calling my phone, messages from Jenna that felt off. At first, I dismissed it as paranoia, but Emily insisted I take it seriously. One evening, while the kids were asleep, I saw the car again. This time, I walked outside and approached it. The driver sped off, but not before I caught a glimpse of their face. It wasn't Jenna, but I had a sinking feeling she was behind it. Mark confirmed my suspicions the next day. Jenna had hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on me. "She's desperate," he said. "Don't give her anything to use against you." The next time Jenna came for a supervised visit, I confronted her. "Is this how you want to play it? Hiring someone to spy on me?" She looked genuinely shocked. "What are you talking about?" "Don't lie to me, Jenna. I saw the car. I know what you're doing." She hesitated, then sighed. "I had to. You've shut me out completely. I needed to know if the kids were okay." "They're fine," I snapped. "Better than they've been in months. And if you really cared about them, you wouldn't be dragging this out in court." Her eyes narrowed. "You're not perfect, John. I'm going to prove that." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. The day of the final custody hearing arrived, and the tension was palpable. Both sides presented their cases, but it was clear the judge was leaning in my favor. The evidence against Jenna was damning, and her desperate attempts to discredit me had only backfired. When the ruling came, it was a mix of relief and heartbreak. I was granted primary custody, with Jenna receiving supervised visitation until she could demonstrate stability. She broke down in tears as the decision was read, but I felt no satisfaction. There were no winners in this battle, only survivors. Life after the ruling was quieter, but no less challenging. The kids began to adjust to the new normal, though they still missed Jenna. I encouraged their relationship with her, despite everything. They deserved to have a mother, even if she wasn't the woman I thought she was. Jenna, to her credit, seemed to be trying. She attended counseling, stayed consistent with her visits, and began rebuilding her life. There were moments when I saw glimpses of the woman I had once loved, but they were fleeting. I focused on healing, both for myself and the kids. Emily remained a constant source of support, and slowly, we began to find our footing again. Months turned into a year, and the pain of betrayal began to fade. The scars remained, but they no longer defined me. I learned to find joy in the small moments, Bryce's soccer games, my daughter's laughter, quiet evenings with Emily and the kids. Jenna and I found a fragile peace. We would never be what we once were, but we were learning to coexist for the sake of the children. One evening, as I tucked the kids into bed, Bryce hugged me tightly. "I'm glad we're here, Dad," he said. I smiled, my heart swelling with pride and gratitude. "Me too, buddy. Me too." It wasn't the life I had planned, but it was a life worth living. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future.